The Sens and Bruins are tied for the last two playoff spots in the East as we speak. The Habs are just 2 points back. So we're going to play best shot, worst shot, and shot in the dark with Cheryl Pounder. Cheryl, let's assume the Leafs, Panthers, and Lightning all grab the top three spots in the Atlantic. That leaves 2 spots for those 3 teams. So who's got the best shot at grabbing a playoff spot between the Sens, Habs, and Bruins?
I'm going with the Ottawa Senators, Gino, and I don't want pointing fingers at me after the fact. But when I'm looking at this team in particular, I think Travis Green's done a magnificent job really finding a way to have defensive posture for this group. This has been their Achilles heel, and they've done such a better job in terms of defending off the rush and defending in zone. Let's just start with that as one point. Now, all of a sudden, you've got a group that's believing and trusting in that process. Listen, Brady Tkachuk, he's got 160 hits, but guess what? He hasn't even gotten on the score sheet in the last 7 games. Batherson hasn't been producing either, but these guys are finding a way to win. Look no further to that game against the Boston Bruins a few nights back. This is a team, they would have folded the tent. I mean, giving up a 2-goal lead, and then all of a sudden they find a way back with just over 3 minutes, a 2-goal deficit, to come back and win in a shootout. So I'm looking at this team, they're maturing, they're growing, and let's face it, they're getting goaltending. When you get goaltending, confidence starts from the back out. So my belief is in the Senators team right now.
Wow, what a turnaround. On this day last year, Cheryl, the Sens were dead last in the East with no shot at a playoff spot. Now you've given them the best shot among this group of 3. So between the Habs and Bruins then, which has got the worst shot at making a playoffs this year?
I'm going to go with the Boston Bruins here, Gino, and this is a tough one for me because you know the pedigree, you know the history of these guys making the playoffs and what they can do when they get there. But when I look at this group, they just feel disconnected. Listen, they got rid of Jim Montgomery. You thought you'd get a coaching bump. Well, you didn't really get it. And then all of a sudden you look down the middle. They're really lean there. Lindholm has not done a great job, as we know. And you look at Zadorov as well. I mean, these are guys that came into the fold, and the expectation, it hasn't been met. So when I look at this roster in particular, I feel like the construction is flawed. And not only is it flawed, I don't think that they're going to get to that playoff spot because I feel like there's something that's missing. It's not an underlying metric. Yeah, as an analyst, you're looking at those numbers. But for me, it's also a gut punch. It's a gut feel right now. And there's something just off with that group. And I'm not sure that they can put it back together to get that playoff spot.
What a huge fall from grace for Boston. On this day last year, they were the best team in the East. They were second overall in the NHL standings. They slipped 13 points, and now you're labeling them with the worst shot of making the playoffs between themselves, the Habs and the Sens. All right, what about the Habs then, Cheryl? By default, I assume you're giving them a shot in the dark at a playoff spot. So what's Marty St. Louis' role in elevating them to their first trip to the postseason under his leadership?
Well, that's the thing. I think he's dealt with these young players extremely well, and he knows how to tweak. He knows how to push buttons. And listen, Slafkovsky's had a tough season, in particular at the beginning of it. But now all of a sudden you see a physical element to his game. Maybe it's Newhook, finding his legs, finding the pace to his game. So Marty St. Louis knows what he's got. And what he's got right now is a group that's in rhythm. I mean, if you do look at their underlying metrics since December, this is a team that's a top 5 team in the NHL in almost everything. In particular, let's have a look at their goals for. When you're putting the puck in the net and you're getting it from all areas, you know your team is lighting it up. But for me, when I look at this group in particular, I'll look at that wave of energy and the belief and the optimism. They're the underdog here. So they can play light. They can play free. Look no further to Saturday night, Gino. They're playing the Toronto Maple Leafs. They've got a 3-goal lead. Then they get their butts handed to them, right? 7 straight goals. So you'd think they'd be deflated. What happens? They come back against the Rangers, right? Deficit 4 different times in the game, and they find a way to win it in overtime. To me, that tells you that there's some sort of belief within that room. It's an intangible, and you can't measure that one. And so for me, going with the gut again, and I'm saying they got a shot in the dark.
All right, best shot, worst shot, and shot in the dark with Cheryl Pounder.